Let's start in prayer. Jesus, we come before you brokenhearted and at the end of ourselves. We need you. We can't do it ourselves. We've tried and failed. Amen. None of us are any better or worse than the rest of us. So we just kind of open-handedly surrender everything to you. Lead us. Speak through me. Give us the words that you need to be spoken today. Amen. As I said, I'm Hunter. I'm a preaching ambassador from Olivet, which means they send me out to churches and I get to preach. And it is a crazy, I love doing it. It's terrifying. I'm a children's ministry major, so I'm used to teaching to people this tall. And big people are scary. So it gives me lots of new experience. I really enjoy it. This is actually my 4th church. So still getting in the groove of things, but I'm really glad to be here. I appreciate you guys opening your doors to let me come and bring the message today. I'm in my 2nd year of college, so I'm a sophomore, and it's interesting adjusting to the change. And one of the biggest changes for me that's been weird is with my grandparents. Now, bear with me, I am going somewhere here, this is not random. Since getting to college, I've actually seen my grandparents more, which is interesting because usually you would see them less. But since getting to college, I've seen my grandparents more because I actually end up living closer to them in my house. So recently, they were actually up at Olivet for this thing called Grandparents' Day, which is this fun little event they do for grandparents, and I don't know what all goes on because I'm not a grandparent, but I got to eat dinner with them and see them. And one of the interesting things about grandparents that they do is when they meet someone, and I don't know if anyone else has experienced this might just be my grandparents, I'm not sure. When they meet someone, for instance, at the dinner table, and we were sitting with 3 families, we sat down and they're meeting other grandparents and they're talking. Oh, hi, I'm such and such, and we're from such and such, and oh yeah, we have 3 kids and 8 family members, and oh, we went to Walmart last week, and they talk about like what happened today, what happened last week, and they like talk about who they know, and they find someone in common, and then they're connected. You know, I don't know if any of you, I've experienced this all the time. Everywhere I go, my grandparents, they learn about me, they learn about my siblings, they learn about my cousins, where we live, everything. They get the whole deal. I feel bad for all the poor people listening to them. I can't imagine they want to know that much about my family. Well, speak really loudly.
Yeah, you're far.
There we go. I can hear myself now. Oh, wow, okay. So grandparents are really, really interesting. It's been fun getting to know them. And as random as that was, I have to set it aside. I'm going to come back to it. But before I go anywhere else, I need to introduce where I'm going to be talking from today. So I'm going to be speaking out of Colossians. So if any of your Bibles, I'll give you time to flip to it while I give a little background. Before I've been really bad, I'll just like start jumping into the Colossians. People will be like, I'm not there yet, calm down. So I'm learning. The background in Colossians is, it's a letter Paul wrote to the church of Colosse, or Colossae, or Colossae, or however you want to say it. I don't actually know. And he is speaking because the church there has started listening to some false teachings. So they're doing their church thing, they're going to church, but things aren't quite right. They aren't practicing what should be Christianity. They're focused more on worship of angels and living a certain way and being this righteous person than really following Christ. And so Paul writes this letter to say, hey, don't do that. That's not the church. The church is called to be something else than that. And this summer I was reading through it, and I just kind of fell in love with Colossians. I just kept reading it over and over and over again. And I was like, I'm going to write a sermon about this one day. Then I got this thing, and I was like, you know what? Perfect. I'm going to preach a sermon, and that's what I wanted to write a sermon on. So I love Colossians. And in the beginning of Colossians, reading it recently, something really struck me. He has this section, Paul has a section in all of his letters, and it's this little greeting section. In my Bible, it's called Paul's Thanksgiving and Prayer. And it's in almost all of his letters unanimously. And he kind of talks, and in these sections, he talks about, well, how the gospel's doing, how he's doing. He says, the same good news that comes to you is going out all over the world. He's giving them the news of the church. They talk about who they know, because he hasn't been to the church yet, but he sent someone who had, and so he talks about him, and he makes connections, and he talks to us about what's happening this day. And I was reading it, and I was thinking, man, you know what Paul sounds like? My grandparents. cannot keep that out of a sermon. There's no way. That was too good. And so I titled my sermon today, A Series of Bad Analogies. So bear with me. There's many, many more. So, Paul as my grandparents, I couldn't get over that. That was too funny to me. And because of the false teachings in the church, Paul has a big task to do here. He needs to remind the church of Colossae who they are and who they're following. And so the first section he does after his Thanksgiving part is talks about Christ. And in my opinion, it's titled Christ is Supreme. And I want to read it. We'll start in chapter 1, verse 15. It says, Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. He existed before anything was created and is supreme over all creation. For through him God created everything in the heavenly realms and on earth. He made the things we can see and the things we can't see, such as thrones, kingdoms, rulers, and authorities in the unseen world. Everything was created through him and for him. He existed before anything else, and he holds all creation together. Christ is also the head of the church, which is his body. He is the beginning, supreme over all who rise from the dead. So he is first in everything. For God, in all his fullness, was pleased to live in Christ, and through him God reconciled everything to himself. He made peace with everything in heaven and on earth by means of Christ's blood on the cross. I love this. Paul goes and he says, you need to know who Christ is. He came and he died, and we are reconciled to him. I love how Paul describes him. He says, Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. Yes. I thought that was cool, and so I put a bad analogy behind it, and as a sermon titled, A Series of Bad Analogies tends to do. And I thought, wow, Jesus is like a black light. You get the invisible ink on your arm, and then Christ goes, whoop, there you go. So there's a bad analogy number 2 for you. Christ is like a black light. He shows us who God is. Yeah. It goes on, and it says, he is supreme over all creation. There's a footnote that says he's the firstborn. So he comes, and then creation comes. And I love that, putting Christ supreme over everything. Yeah. You continue on, and it says, he holds all creation together. And so I thought, how many of you have seen Star Wars? I don't know how many of you have seen Star Wars. But I thought, man, Jesus is this cool thing that holds the universe together. I thought, Jesus is a lot like the Force. And so bad analogy number 3. Christ is not only a black light, he's also the Force. Amen. Yes. Verse 18 states that he is the head of the church. Christ is first in everything. Yes. So Paul, in the beginning of his letter, gives us the reason why we should follow him. He says, this is why. In an age where they were struggling with what to follow and who to listen to, he says, this is who you follow. Yes. This is the God we follow. Christ, supreme over everything, the firstborn of creation. He holds creation together. He's the head of the church. Paul is giving the church reasons to follow Christ. He's saying, this is why. This is why we do this. Yes. And verse 20 goes on to say that God reconciled everything through him. Or in other words, through Christ, God brought creation back into relationship with himself. We were separated from God, and Christ came, and now we're back. Or in a bad analogy sense, Christ was like a Band-Aid helping us heal. We were hurt, we were broken, and Christ came, and now we are healed and restored. Bad analogy number 4. There's more. I'm going to keep rolling them out. And I love this because it goes on to verse 21, and this is probably the best part of Colossians in my mind. It says, this includes you, who were once far away from God. And I love this because I can take this out of Colossians and say it to myself. This includes me. Because the truth is, I'm no better than anyone in here. I'm just as bad as the next guy on the street or the person we see at Walmart. Christ did this for me. This includes me. This includes you. Yes. This doesn't just apply to the church in Colossians. This applies to us. This includes you. Amen. Verse 22 says, we have become holy and blameless before Christ. We have been made free. Then after this, the question becomes, what are we free from? Paul mentions this being free, this being holy and blameless, but there was no prelude to that. There was no beginning to that. It just started. And so he goes on after that, and he starts telling us what we are free from. Chapter 2, verse 11 says, when you came to Christ, you were circumcised, but not by a physical procedure. Christ performed a spiritual circumcision, the cutting away of your sinful nature. I love that. Cutting away of your sinful nature. This seems like a good point for a bad analogy. So, Christ is like scissors. He is cutting away our sinful nature. We were hurt, and then he cut us away. And I love that because it takes it completely out. He didn't just cover up. He didn't just cover up over it. He cut it out of our lives. We have been set free from that nature.
Yes.
If you continue on, in that day they were listening to lots of false teachings, and the teachings they were listening to were very rule-oriented, very legalistic. It was saying, you need to come to church at this time, and do this a certain way, and do this a certain way. And so, in chapter 2, verses 16 through 19, we see Paul saying, you no longer have to follow those rules. That is what you were free from. You were free from this legalistic way of living, and you can live in the grace of Jesus. And I love this because he says, don't let anyone condemn you for what you eat or drink, or for not celebrating certain holy days or new moon ceremonies or Sabbaths. For these rules are only shadows of the reality yet to come, and Christ himself is that reality. Don't let anyone condemn you by insisting on pious self-denial or worship of angels, saying they have had visions about these things. Their sinful minds have made them proud, and they are not connected to Christ, the head of the body. For he holds the whole body together with its joints and ligaments, and it grows as God nurtures it. He says, don't listen to them. They have false teachings. They live this legalistic view of the church. You don't have to listen to that. We live in a grace, in a new grace with Christ. Verses 20 to 23 say a very similar thing about living free from these rules this church was under at the time. We are free from this world. And that's the good news of Colossians, that Christ has made us free. Christ became the answer. If you go back to verse 9 and 10 of chapter 2, it says, so you were also complete through your union with Christ, who is head over every ruler and authority. We are made complete with Christ. Nothing else is the answer to our problem. Christ is the answer, not other teachings or principles or morals, but Christ. So we see here that Paul has laid out pretty clearly the freedom we have. First, he tells us who Christ is, the supreme black light force, band-aid, firstborn of creation. Then he tells us what we are free from, the rules and false teachings of this world, living according to how people tell us we should live instead of living how Christ we should live. But the question becomes, what now? What do we do with this freedom? Do we continue living our lives as if nothing had happened? I think not. Luckily, Paul answers this very question. See, it's easy to say we changed, and to say God cut away our spiritual nature, our sinful nature, and then not do anything about it. It's easy to come to church. It's easy to open the Bible every once in a while. But what are we really called to do from that? And that is the question Paul addresses in the next part. Going back to the beginning of chapter 2, verses 6 through 7, it says, and now, just as you accepted Christ Jesus as your Lord, you must continue to follow him. Let your roots grow down into him, and let your lives be built on him. Then your faith will grow strong in the truth you were taught, and you will overflow with thankfulness. Continue to follow him. We are called to continue to push forward and call him. Our roots will grow strong, and we will overflow with thankfulness.
Yes.
That's not a good sign. That's not a sign of a good Christian. I don't know what it is. Overflowing with thankfulness, no matter what. In your day, when it's hard, be thankful that God has given you a second chance, no matter what. In chapter 3, verses 1 through 4, speaks to this also. Paul calls us to set our minds on the realities of heaven. Think higher thoughts. Think about Christ. Focus ourselves there, not on this world. But it's more than that. Our walk with Christ doesn't require just thinking about it. It doesn't require just reading it or just coming. It requires entering it. It requires action on our part. It requires action. Verses 5 of chapter 3 says, so put to death the sinful earthly things lurking within you. Have nothing to do with sexual immorality, impurity, lust, and evil desires. Don't be greedy, for a greedy person is an idolater, worshiping the things of this world. Verse 8 tells us to get rid of anger, rage, malicious behavior, slander, and dirty language. Verse 10 in chapter 3 tells us to put on our new nature and learn to become like our Creator. 12, 13, and 14 continue on even further. We must clothe ourselves with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Forgive others because God forgave us. Always be thankful. Always be thankful. This is who we, as a church, as people who follow Christ, are called to be. Loving, humble, patient, tender, quick to forgiveness. The list goes on and on. Chapter 3, verses 17 states that we are an ambassador of Christ. I don't know about you, but that sounds scary to me. If I were Christ, I would not pick me to be his ambassador. There are lots of better ways to get the message out than me. That's a big burden. Man, you are Christ's ambassador. No matter where you go, if you call yourself a Christian, people are going to look on you as a reflection of Christ. And that is a big thing to carry. Yet he chooses us, and that is the blessing. I know I'm bad at this. I don't lead out in love. I'm not humble. I'm not patient and kind. I'm the least worthy to be his ambassador. But luckily, chapter 1 it states this includes me. I'm called to live this way. We are called to live this way.
Yes.
As chapter 3, verses 12 through 17 showed us, we are called to live differently than the world around us. Lead in love, not condemnation. Lead in forgiveness, not hate. Patience instead of threats and yelling and screaming. We are called to be set apart. Christ walked around with love. He walked around with patience and mercy. And as we Christians, do we walk around the same way? Or do we walk around more condemning than anything? Are we pointing a finger, or are we holding a hand? I think that is the question Paul wants us to ask ourselves today. And after this section where he says, this is how you live, he goes on to talk about households. And I hesitate to go here, because obviously I'm not a husband, or a wife, or a slave, or a master, and so I don't fit in most of these categories he talks about. But reading it, something really stuck out to me. It was honor. No matter who he was talking to, he wanted them to honor the other people in their family.
Yes.
As, I forget who it was, someone mentioned how we all have broken family members earlier today. And it's true. And we can really lead out and honor them no matter where they are in life. You know, how you treat your family is really important, you know, and I'm really bad at this. I have 3 younger siblings and we fight constantly. And I can take a lesson from this. Honor the ones around you. Live as Christ would. Honor the family God has given you to be in this moment.
Amen.
Lead out in love. Show our families that we care. Reach out to those who have drifted. Refuse to give up on loving them.
Yes.
My mom has a cousin. I got really far from Jesus. And she said that she pushed her relationship with him no matter what. Even when he was far, far away and he was not doing great things, she continued the relationship. And she said now, she said she's so glad she never gave up on him. He's not a Christian, or he may not call himself that, but he appreciates the love she has shown him. The fact that she never gave up on him, even as he was drifting and he was around, and instead of condemning that, she loved him. She said, you know what, I don't care what you do, I'm called to love you, and that's that. There's no strings attached, no ifs, ands, or buts. I'm just going to love you.
Yes.
And I love this. The fact that no matter how broken our families may get, and it's our families, it's our first thing we should be focused on. Loving them, showing them who Christ is. I want you to know that all these sermons that I preach, every one I preach, comes from a place of God teaching me something. And so when I say I'm no better than you, it's because I'm preaching probably more to myself than anyone else. That's what makes these sermons mean something to me. I don't just preach them, I listen to them. I go back and listen to them. Oh my goodness, I'm really bad at that. And I love it. Christ has called us to live out a certain way, to be the church. And instead of condemning, we can point fingers. And I often see Christians in my life pointing fingers, and it breaks my heart. Because Christ never pointed the finger. He always led with a hand and a hug. He always let out in love. And I love that. And no matter where we are, Christ says that this includes us. The message includes us. We're his ambassadors. And the fact that he would choose us is mind-boggling.
Yes.
Why would he choose us? There are so many better ways. So many better ways. I mean, it says, if it's silent, the rocks would cry out. So obviously the rocks are better following Christ than we are, because if we aren't crying out, the rocks have to do it. And there's got to be a better way. And yet, He chooses us. Yet he says that no matter where you're at, continue following me. Continue living for me. Continue to be thankful. Live out with tender-hearted mercy and kindness. It's my hope with preaching this is that we all walk away called up, knowing that we're called to live to a higher standard than the world around us. I know as I went through high school, it was hard. It was hard to know that I was different. I had different standards than everyone else. They would go out partying, and I would say no. And it was very difficult for me because I had to sacrifice some close friendships in my life for that, to live for Christ as much as the best I knew how. And at the same time, I had to balance the, yes, I don't live like you, but I can love you where you're at. And that is a hard balance to get. And I think I'll probably spend the rest of my life learning how to do that. I'm not great at it. But I love the fact that Christ has cut out our sinful nature. He's called us to live in it. He's come to restore. He's come to be the black light and the Band-Aid and the scissors and all the other analogies. He's come to change our lives. Let's pray. God, you've come for us, and you have come to use us, and you ask us to enter into partnership and relationship with you, and so we open-handedly surrender our lives. We give it up to you so that you can use us in any way possible. I pray that you would help us lead out in patience and kindness, because we can't do it without you. We need you. Whenever we try to do that, we fall. And so we ask you to fill us with your patience, with your love, with your mercy, with your forgiveness, God. And it would just flow out of us as an expression of worship.